the latest anti-gay laws, and it almost seems as if we've been very quiet as South Africa after these announcements. What's the official position?
Well, the statement that the South African government released said that we are going to approach many capitals around the world where the issue of gay rights requires clarity. And we will be saying, amongst other things, to the capitals that we need clarity on the status and the rights of the LGBTI community. And we will also be inquiring as to the status of our own citizens who fall into the same category. If they decide to visit those countries, what will be their position? What will the countries where the issue of the gays and lesbians is criminalized, what will they do to our citizens who fall within the same categories if they decide to visit those countries?
Marcus, firstly, what's your response to that? But more importantly, what's been the response from TAC with regards to these almost archaic medieval laws that have been passed in Uganda?
Yeah, I think the first thing worth saying is that these laws are quite simply cruel. They put people's lives in real danger. They criminalize people simply for, they criminalize consenting adults simply for loving each other. So, we cannot understate the seriousness of this legislation. It's really akin to apartheid legislation, akin to the persecution of the Jews. Basically, a whole segment of society is systematically being discriminated against by the state. We have been very underwhelmed, to say the least, about the South African government's response to this crisis. Saying that we seek clarity is simply not good enough. The clarity is there. You can go read the law. I don't know how much more clarity we need. Yeah. And I think given our own struggle history, our history of laws that discriminate against a class of our society, yeah, we should be taking a much stronger position, especially because we're another African country. It's one thing if the United States or Norway or Sweden criticizes Uganda, but it will be a much stronger criticism if that comes from South Africa. So the lack of criticism shows a very disappointing lack of moral stature from our leadership.
Your response to that, and then earlier in the week, Nelson, Barack Obama warned that ties between Kampala and Washington would be damaged by this legislation. How do you see these laws affecting the relationship then going further between South Africa and Uganda?
Well, we must state that it is not only in Uganda where you would find what is called anti-gay legislation. There are more than 38 countries on the African continent itself where you would find similar laws. And there are about close to 80 countries throughout the world which have similar legislation. And we believe, as the South African government, that the matter must be tackled from that perspective, recognizing that it is a global phenomenon and that we cannot choose and pick the countries that need to be engaged on this matter. We must address the issue in its entirety and look at the situation throughout the world. And if we are to apply pressure or seek clarity from any country that has got that sort of legislation, we must be consistent and look at the situation where it rears its head. And it is not only in one country on the continent. This matter is widespread.
Marcus, I want to come back to you. There's also, we live in a country where, a woman is raped every so many minutes. We all know the stats are quite terrible. Along with these laws, there are also laws around dress that's been passed. Women are not allowed to wear miniskirts, for instance, in public anymore, or leggings and this sort of thing. What do you make of that? And then also reaction to what Nelson just said.
Yeah, I think there's an important distinction to make. In South Africa, homophobia is still a problem. We have horrible things happening like corrective rape that certainly needs to be dealt with. But the crucial difference is that we have legislation that makes that illegal. Now, what happens in a country like Uganda is that you have this law, you have this bill signed into law, and then a few days later you have a newspaper publishing a list of gay or suspected gay people with their home addresses and their phone numbers. Putting, that kind of thing puts their lives at real risk. So there's a clear difference between what's happening in South Africa and these countries. Now, coming back to the previous point, it is true that similar laws have been passed in Nigeria and a number of other countries, and of course, all of that is of concern. We think that's saying that many countries have such really inhuman laws is no defense for this kind of quiet diplomacy that we're seeing. We have a strong constitution that's very clear about the rights of minorities. And, I would argue that the Department of International Relations and Cooperation is in dereliction of their duty, of their constitutional duty, if they do not take a stronger stance on this.
I want to go to Nelson.
Oh,
sorry. Yes.
No, go ahead.
Just finished. I want to bring it back to South Africa, Nelson, because, this is, as you said, it's a widespread issue. What are we doing, or tell us about the measures that our government has adopted to enhance the protection of the gay and lesbian community in our country?
Well, in the statement that we released, first and foremost, we acknowledged that here in South Africa, despite the Constitution and the guarantees that it affords to people that are of a particular sexual orientation, we still have challenges with respect to the implementation of the law and the respect of other people's sexual orientation by other community members. So that is an important admission to make as South Africa, even if we still recognize that the Constitution affords gays and lesbians and transsexual persons protection, and that the courts have taken a stance to prevent other community members from harming the LGBTI community based on their sexual orientation. So in South Africa, there's no question about whether or not the law affords the people of the LGBTIs constitutional protection from harm based on their sexual orientation. What we are battling with now is the implementation of that law and the fact that we still have people being discriminated based on their sexual orientation. But the law comes to the aid of those who are aggrieved in that manner. And that is a matter that is ongoing, and there's no question about the commitment of the government to protecting people from all sexual orientations based on the fact that the Constitution is very clear on this matter.
Yeah. Just quickly, just tell us what you say to that, Marcus. And then also, I think we'd like to know what sort of interventions would you like, if not only in Uganda, the South African government should then make throughout the entire continent?
Well, yeah, firstly, I think it is, while we have very good legislation in South Africa, implementation is a serious problem, and, we'll fully agree with that. What we found is, in our work as a treatment action campaign, we followed up many rape cases in Khayelitsha, especially. And often the policing and justice system just isn't able to deal with it. The system's falling apart. That's why we're having a commission of inquiry in Khayelitsha at the moment. Now, if you'll remember, the Minister of Police actually tried to stop that commission of inquiry. So, that brings into question their actual commitment to fixing the implementation problems on the ground. Because a lot of this, some of it is cultural, and we have to fight the culture of homophobia. But the much more urgent issue that we can do more about is the implementation of the law, prosecuting rapists, prosecuting people who commit so-called corrective rape and this kind of thing. As to what South Africa should do, I think it's quite clear. We should name and shame countries like Uganda and Nigeria. Our government should make strong public statements that put pressure on these other countries. And we should clearly state that being homosexual is not Western or African or anything like that. It's universal. We have homosexual people in all cultures, and that's just a scientific fact. So we should be clear about this, and we should use our influence in the African Union. As I say, we can't keep going on with this kind of quiet diplomacy. We have to take a stance, and given our struggle history, given what we know about what it's like when the law systematically discriminates against a group of people, it's completely unacceptable for the government to take such a weak position.
Thank you very much, Marcus Lowe, for joining us today. That's Marcus Lowe in Cape Town. You've got 30 seconds to give us a quick response before we have to wrap up, Nelson. Thank you.
Yes, I must say that, the notion of quiet diplomacy, really now, you're just throwing it around as a slogan, because we are here, we are talking, we released a statement, we are following it up with, interviews like the one we're doing now to articulate the position of the South African government with regard to its commitment to the protection of persons irrespective of their sexual orientation. Our statement is very clear, and the notion of quiet diplomacy, we don't know where it comes from. We are here, we have made our voice heard as the government, and we are not going to move on that issue of our commitment to the protection of the people who fall within the category of the LGBTI.
Thank you very much for joining us. I'm sure that everyone will keep an eye on these developments over the weeks and months to come. Thank you both for joining us this morning.